Good evening. My name is Daniel Coleman. I am Assistant Director of Career Advising with the YU Career Center. I'm delighted to be back to give another one of our webinar series brought to you every Wednesday evening during the fall season in this remote COVID and hopefully soon to be post-COVID era. What I wanted to address this evening is contrarian approaches to networking and finding a job or internship. As we know, this era that we're in right now has turned the world to a large degree upside down and also brought with it a lot of innovation, a lot of new ways of doing things, such as these remote webinars and opportunities to interact with students or would-be students or just friends of YU or community members beyond our walls, which we might not ordinarily have the opportunity to do so. And yes, it's brought challenges, but also opportunities as well. And I would say, even recent news, other news we've heard, let's say from Israel, about peace treaties with various Arab nations provide a lot of hope and provide opportunities. I think, commerce and travel will increase in leaps and bounds with those countries, and certainly opportunities in that regard as well. So what we want to get into the mindset tonight is looking for various opportunities as we embark on our career search. They don't have to be necessarily as far-flung as the Middle East per se, but think about opportunities and think about what current events say about the direction that our search may take us. So let's launch straight in. And before we do, just wanted to introduce the rest of my crew, the Yeshiva University career team over here. So we're all eager to, this was taken right in front of our Wolf offices. We spend time on both campuses, and we look forward in the not too distant future to welcoming you in person. In the meantime, you can get a quick glimpse of our mission and vision. I won't spend much time on this evening, but just wanted to put it up there for reference. And wanted to kick off my part in this presentation with, I was of course looking for the Robert Frost illustration about the road less traveled and came up with Jerry Seinfeld. So we'll take that. And I think it's a useful caveat for our conversation tonight, that sometimes the road less traveled is less traveled for a reason, right? So that is, I think, a good caveat. Sometimes there are sort of, things that we may think are off the beaten track, or someone may present us with a very unusual sort of resume. Let's say, for example, all in pink and blue, or red and orange, or some wild and wonderful colors, but perhaps, unless they're in a very creative industry, that's not necessarily for their average role going to actually be appreciated by recruiters. So we have to be, when we're thinking outside the box, we also need to be sensible about that as well. So what I want you to think about is, what have you tried? What have you not tried? Sometimes people do try variations in their resume. And indeed, sort of resume 103 would talk about, and we would talk with students about how to tailor their resume. We even have a program for that now called JobScan, which we help students, and that can help students guide themselves on how to enhance and tailor their resume for the specific job they're applying to. So ask us about that. But, in very general terms, what are the types of places you're looking at for both career advice and career strategy? And what are the platforms that you use? So here's a couple of platforms that most of our students will know about, be that YUCL, or Yeshiva University Career Link, of course, LinkedIn, internships.com, Volt.com. Volt, for those that aren't familiar, is a great resource for information on all things career related. And I would, well, we, not just I, but we at the Career Center do not generally recommend a spray and pray approach. And certainly if that has not been working for you, meaning if you've just been sending out resumes, and rarely ever investing in a cover letter, if at all, but just trying to sort of click the easy apply and just taking that quick route, you want to reevaluate whether that spray and pray is working for you. So just again, take a moment to think about what you've been applying for, what methods you've used to apply. Consider what types of companies you've been applying for. So for example, if you've always been applying for companies which have, let's say, 50,000 employees and above, right? Usually there's a brand name, often multinational companies, or certainly perhaps multi-regional companies. You want to think about, is this the only type of company that I'm willing to work for? Maybe the smaller companies, maybe startup companies, or small companies are ones which will actually give you more opportunity at an entry level and perhaps an opportunity to take on more responsibility early on. Likewise, if you're looking at finance positions, you know, do those roles just exist? I would venture to say no is the answer, but do they just exist in the financial field, the, you know, the common high street names or the Wall Street names, perhaps Barclays or JP Morgan Chase or Goldman and so on? Or are there opportunities to look beyond the industry and to see, well, what type of finance positions may be available at pharmaceutical companies or at product companies or fashion companies, right? A lot of finance roles. And the same thing with tech. As an example, if people are only applying to tech roles within brand name tech companies, well, what about tech roles in fintech at the intersection of finance and tech and so on? So our key, just like with geographically, if you're only looking in one geographic location, our key advice to begin with would be to diversify, right? Just like you want a diversified portfolio, you want to diversify your the places and the platforms which you are using to apply. Why is, or perhaps to compound this issue, just to be aware, one of the most sort of, I think, you know, when talking about platforms that people are using, one of the big challenges that students have is that, and not just students, but people that are career transitioning, is they apply to many jobs and those go unanswered. And sometimes those jobs are actually already filled almost before they're posted. So in our first point over here on this slide, you can see that, well, 80% of them don't even get advertised to begin with. And obviously once they are advertised, especially on their on a very popular medium like LinkedIn or internships.com or sites or indeed.com, there may be thousands or certainly hundreds of people applying for those positions. So one thing to consider is that there are routes to actually find out what is not being advertised, right? It seems, according to some data that we've seen in the Career Center and that you can find publicly available, over 90% of roles are filled by referrals, right? So even those that are advertised, again, like we said before, they go very quickly. And again, some aren't even advertised at all. So you really need that insider information to know what are companies' hiring schedules, when are positions likely to become available, and if you can be one of the first to apply and apply because of a connection you have to an insider, that is really the best way to be able to connect with those positions and find out about those positions as and when they arise. So use your assets, and we're going to show a little diagram in a moment to help us think about what our assets actually are. But essentially, our contacts, right? People and contacts of contacts, or as in LinkedIn speak, we might have first degree connections, second degree, third degree, and maybe people even beyond that. So here, before we launch into a little bit more about networking, I just wanted to bring your attention to this link where we have information about how you can network and what do you even say. Many students and others are stuck with, well, how do I even go about the informational networking? And so this gives you some tips. This is one of our handouts, bit.ly/informational networking, and it is case sensitive. Okay, so let's have a little look at one way to help you to identify your network. I like to think about it as concentric circles. You start in the middle, right in the center with, you know, people in your immediate family. It could be a brother-in-law, it could be a cousin. Then there may be your neighbors. Maybe you see them frequently, maybe not so frequently, but people that, you know, you share living space with, people maybe you see around at the local store the whole time. Your schedules happen to coincide. professors, for those that are in school, that'll be and I encourage you to keep up with your professors even beyond school. Send them a holiday card. We'll reference that later on. Friends, of course, and parents of friends or children of friends, depending on what life stage you're up to. Community members, so that could be in your synagogue. It could be members of your gym. I have a mentor even who's been very successful connecting with people at his gym. Obviously, this is pre-COVID, although some areas of the country may already be open up for more activity in the gym. Generally, professionals in the field, we encourage you to consider, how can I reach out to professionals? And it could be through a national association, right? Sometimes there are student membership available for just, I don't know, $30 or even free for the first year. Whereas the professionals might be paying hundreds of dollars for their membership. You can access the same professional databases and networking tools and access to webinars, etc., when you become a member of the associations in your field. Again, go back to your professors and ask them, or if you're not sure, or ask people who are in the profession, what are those national associations that they belong to? And meetup.com is another example of finding a great place to where people have shared interests online. I saw not long ago, Coders Who Hike was the name of one of the groups, right? So it was a coding group who obviously at this point are meeting in person, but they're doing some, I guess, limited hiking activities in the Corona era. So they're still meeting up and in a probably more leisurely setting, exchanging tips and networking, etc. So that is a little intro to the types of people you can reach out to. And I would ask 5 of them, right? So again, going back, perhaps one person from each of those circles, maybe one person in your family, one person who may be a professor or a mentor or teacher of yours, a friend or parent of a friend, a professional. Ask them, how did they get their job? Not just will that be revealing and hopefully reinforce some of what I'm sharing tonight, that it's often those things that you do which are perhaps a little bit off the beaten track or going the extra mile beyond what other people are doing. But you'll also be able to get some good tips for them, and they'll be, I'm sure at least one of them will give you some inspiration. And it's like, well, if they can do that, I can do that. Or I never quite thought of that. How about let me try that. Maybe I can't try it for whatever reason to the same extent, but let me incorporate that into my repertoire, into my sort of job search and acquisition skills. So that would maybe be my suggestion. It's a great way to engage people in conversation as well. Just ask them, hey, tell me a little bit about how you found your first job. How did you find your current job? And that is a great way to get source information. Go offline. So this is really important, just like, again, to kind of reinforce the previous point. Think about what is it that you have, what can you gain online? You can certainly set up appointments, you can email, you can connect with people on LinkedIn, etc. But for every hour you're spending in the job search online, I want you to spend 3, or at least 3, in real conversation. And if 3 is too much for you, make it 2 hours, or maybe make it an hour and a half. But the point is to spend more time offline and actually in conversations with people in relevant fields, rather than spend all of your time, which is too easy in today's world, especially in the COVID era. It's too easy to spend time online. So make yourself a routine and really try and spend the majority of your time in actually having real networking conversations. And I added in the next point to network beyond your field. If there's someone who's not quite aligned with your field, but sounds really interesting to connect to, there's so much interconnectivity in today's business world. It's well worth, let's say for every 5 people that you're networking in your field, this is just a suggestion, but find one person who isn't necessarily in your field, but have a conversation with them anyway. It doesn't necessarily need to be as long, but brainstorm, and there may be elements of crossover between what they do and what you're interested in doing. So learn, I like to say everyone has something to teach. Get a mentor or 3. Like I said, doesn't, you don't have to have just one mentor in today's world. You can have 2 or 3 for different areas of your life or different areas that you're considering pursuing. And this next time I borrowed from somebody it's from a book called The 2-Hour Job Search. You're welcome to look up that book, The 2-Hour Job Search. And it's called The 2 Steps Ahead Mentor, meaning sometimes it's not necessarily going to be the vice presidents or the, the senior product engineer or whatever, the senior people at these companies that you're interested in networking. Sometimes the people that are most valuable are those that have been through your process just a couple of years ahead of you and can speak to both their process, can speak to how they're accelerating their career, what their vision is, and can give you some real-time tips and tricks. So look for someone, and this is a great resource for our current students to do this, is by signing up for YU MVP. It just takes a couple of minutes. And we have some very gracious alumni that have offered to field questions from current students about, and some of them pretty recent alumni, about how they found their first job, or the state of the industry that you're thinking of going into, or just general tips about interviewing or resumes, etc. And I would definitely take advantage of that wonderful resource. Before we go into the latter half of the presentation, I'm going to take a pause here for questions. I see some have already come in the chat. And thank you for joining us in part one, and we will shortly continue with our next slide. And before that, I am going to take some of the questions. So thank you.